welcome to the Classical U podcast. I'm Jesse Hake. I'm the director at Classical U. Classical U is a subsidiary of Classical Academic Press, a curriculum and monograph publishing company. At Classical U, we provide training for teachers and parents interested in learning more about classical education, how to deliver this method in your classrooms, in your homes. I mostly spend time talking with presenters and live learning event guests, and we look forward to sharing more with you as you tune in. Thank you. It is so great to have you back with us, Danielle, you and your family, or 4 of your children anyway, and recording with you 2 years ago, and your husband and a few more of your children. Was just a delightful experience. It still feels like yesterday in many ways. And so it's been great to catch up with you a little bit and to introduce you to our podcast listeners. You are a homeschool mother and you have a degree in education, but right out of the gate as a young married couple decided you were going to homeschool. You were inspired. You tell some of the story in our course, The Golden Thread. But inspired by some experiences and returned to the faith that you had grown up with. You're one of I think the first person I met who's African-American Catholic, multi-generation, which is kind of a rare and remarkable thing. So I love your so many aspects of your story and what you bring to educators. And some of what we're talking about today isn't really, just for homeschoolers. And I don't think your course is either, although you're a home educator and, you speak brilliantly about bringing all aspects of life together. You're really talking about things that are at the heart of what an educator needs to be in the right place and to operate in any kind of, whether it's a classical charter school, faith-based Christian classical school or a homeschool. So I think there's application across those lines. But you're from New Orleans and long, multi-generations there and almost your entire life in New Orleans, returning there after basically just college in Florida, I believe. So it's a pleasure and a delight, and we'll get into a little bit retreat that we've been cooking up together and I'm excited about as well. So thank you so much. And to start out, would your introduction to your course be 2 years later? How would you introduce the Golden Thread?
Well, thank you, Jesse, and just know that I'm one of thousands in New Orleans who are Black and multi-generational Catholic. But
I just need to get out more.
But the course, it was such a wonderful experience. It truly was, and it was so beautifully done. Just kudos to Cap and the editing and video team. It was a beautiful course. In the course, I discussed the questions and how the Golden Thread incorporates all of human history, human experience. It guides us deeper. The Golden Thread course, it really comes out of my homeschooling experience as a mother, as a teacher, as a leader in the community and student of Christian classical education, the different experiences that I had that made me, helped me to synthesize the different books that I've read in classical education and to try to put into practice with my children in a way that was doable by a mother of 6 children. And I loved the ideas of following, of using questions as a guide to help you to think more deeply about nature, purpose, and propriety, to help you to help me to be able to play with the tools of the liberal arts in a way that would be applicable in a one-room schoolhouse. So the questions that came out of that sort of happened over time that I used in the course, guiding questions that helped us to guide our readings for the year. As we lived our lives, I'm a working homeschool mom. with different levels of children and with activities. And so the guiding questions helped me to keep things within the framework. So the questions of who do you say I am? Who is my neighbor? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? What must I do to inherit eternal life? It's just that those questions helped us to follow the golden thread that weaves all people, places, and times together, because it's that which is universal in all of the human story. And that thread helps to guide me to stay on track, to help my students stay focused and on track to point to what is good, true, and beautiful, and that that is the imprint of the Creator that guides us back home. And so it's the lifeline that tethered us in our homeschooling to the education that we're trying to receive, and to help me to remember why I'm doing it.
Yep.
So
it's very holistic and integrating,
yes,
and liberating. I've had people give feedback with the course that they couldn't imagine that 6 children working and to have something that gives you a tether and integrates and keeps you returning to the fundamentals is actually liberating and empowering. So thank you. As 2 years have gone by, you've been reflecting on these themes, continuing in the journey of your own homeschool educating. What are some insights or some additional material that you'd be interested to add or new themes that have come up for you?
I want to talk about what some people have asked me, well, where did the golden thread come from? It's not, I didn't create the term golden thread. In Greek mythology, the golden thread is often associated with the thread that leads one out of a state of confusion, what the Greek names is always, you got to think about how to pronounce it, but Erinys thread that led Theseus out of the labyrinth. That's one example of a golden thread in mythology. Another example would be one might associate the golden thread with the length of one's life or one's destiny that is cut short by the fates, or just cut by the fates. For me, in Christian classical education, I'm referring to the golden thread that guides, directs, and weaves together all people's places and times. And we want to teach our students to be able to find the golden thread and to follow it. So follow the thread that's guiding, directing, and weaving. The golden thread can be found in the great community of recorded human experience. Wendell Berry, whom I found out about through classical studies, classical education studies. Wendell Berry, in his essay on Wallace Stegner and the Great Community, states that the community here, that of the great community, the community here is that of recorded human experience, not the pantheon of great writers. It is immense and diverse, more like the Library of Congress than the Harvard 5-foot shelf. It does include the great writers. It is bewildering both in its amplitude and the eminence of some of its members. A teacher leading his students to the entrance to that community, as would be contributors to it, must know that both he and they are coming to the possibility of error. The teacher may make mistakes about the students. The students may make much more serious ones about themselves. He is leading them, moreover, to a community, not to some singular stump or rostrum from which he would declare the truth. So I remember reading What People Are For. The essay is found in the book, What People Are For. And I was thinking, that to me is the golden thread. It's incorporating this idea that we are weaving, is much larger. This recorded human experience is really big and hard for us to handle. And that's why I said, what a thread. I can follow it. I can enter into that community by staying on this singular thread. Now it makes it more approachable that I can enter and be okay with error.
Yeah.
In Beauty and the Word, Stratford Caldecott refers to the liberal arts as the golden thread that comes from the Greeks, from Pythagoras, who, like many his time, studied the ancient knowledge of the Egyptians, and his successors, both Islamic and Christian, especially St. Augustine, who was a Romanized North African Berber. A thread that weaves its way, this is still Caldecott, that Caldecott is saying the golden thread is a thread that weaves its way through the history of our civilization. These arts, the liberal arts, were intended for the cultivation of freedom and the raising of our humanity to its highest possible level. And later on, Caldecott states, the collective memory of the society to which we belong has the name tradition. We cannot truly be at home without one. The word derives from trans, which is over, and dere, to give. In every society or civilization, a process takes place that can be called a handing over of the stories, the knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of one generation to the next. It is the process that makes each new generation into a source of wisdom for the one that follows. And it takes place generally within the family. What is handed over is a gift. It is not simply a bundle of property whose title deed is being transferred to the next generation. Rather, it carries within it something of the giver. Its transmission is an act of love. And I'm like, wow. So this thread that is weaving together this great community that incorporates all of recorded human experience that we are passing on.
You need help when you're dropped in that pool.
Right, that we are handing over the stories, the knowledge, accumulated wisdom from one generation to the next. And that is truly a gift to be a part of that tradition, that process, and that it happens within families and that it carries within something of the giver is truly a transmission, an act of love. And I was like, wow. So in thinking back about the course and in its application, like, yes, we can use, when you're trying to offer teachers to just like, where's the worksheet? Where's the guide? Just tell me what I'm supposed to do. What's the plan? It's like, yes, you can use these questions, but the questions really become transformative. The tradition becomes transformative. The tradition becomes liberating when it is truly a transmission, is transmitted as an act of love. So the passing on of stories, knowledge, wisdom within the great community, within all of recorded human experience is an act of love empowered by love and incarnated through love. Caldecott states, love is the beginning and end of education because love is the way we become more human. Yes.
Now you're preaching.
We become more human. He also says the ability to think critically and for oneself is part of this tradition, this education that we're trying to hand over, but not in separation from the moral virtues. Conceptual and dialectical thought is not the highest activity of man, which, when you're talking about grammar, logic, and rhetoric, quadrivium and the trivium, and teachers, we tend to think the highest, activity is to finish the book. Or to have the data, the scores only. Like, we start to lose sight. And Caldecott is saying, but the highest thing actually is to give way before contemplation and the development of the spirit through love. So this summer, I really was grappling with the golden thread and what I meant in the course, because I had an encounter with a woman at a conference this summer. And in one of the breakout sessions, she was lamenting the fact that it is impossible for her to teach from a state of rest and love and to encourage wonder in her classroom because of the pace and demands of the curriculum, administration, and the system that she was in. And then my very own sister called me just last week to vent from her classroom. She's whispering on the phone to me. She's like calling, whispering, venting like about the very same thing. And she says that, her charter school is using a scripted classical curriculum where she was supposed to spark wonder from a script in the actually from in the library that's being shared by other people. So they're not even in the classroom by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a quiet place
Mm-hmm.
and you can't go off the script. So my sister, incredulously screamed like, how? She's like, how? When? And they're, the day is jam-packed, full of things that need to be done. And under what conditions and what tools are she supposed to use with this?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew she didn't really want. Well, I knew she wasn't looking for me to have a definite answer.
Yeah, she didn't need another script.
No, she did not. After hanging up with her, she's like, I have to go. She's like, I gotta go back. I can hear the children, like people were still around her. But after prayerfully hearing my sister and remembering the tears from the lady at the conference, there was tears at the conference. I realized, that saying anything like in that moment was not enough. I did have suggestions for my sister and the lady at the conference, and I knew that they would fall short from what they really were seeking. So the rest, the wonder, the love that they needed and sought for their students. Because one of the things my sister said is that she knows she's failing her students. And not that she is failing, like it's not that she's a bad teacher. The whole system is failing the children. And she was sad for the children and for us as a society. And that what they needed, what my sister and the lady from the conference needed and sought for their students and for themselves and in their classrooms could only come from a contemplative practice of a sacramental vision of the golden thread in the classroom. So going beyond the questions or following those questions, the source of those questions, I should say. So yes, contemplative. What do I mean by that? So I mean being rooted in praying without ceasing. So in Carmelite spirituality, which is from medieval times, it actually has roots in actually ancient times, but really became popular in Europe during the Middle Ages. In Carmelite spirituality, it's expressed as...
You have experience.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So I am a part of a Carmelite community. I'm a part of the Discalced secular Carmelites.
Okay.
Secular meaning non-religious. So I'm not professed nun or anything like
no
that.
vows.
That I am trying to live out my faith in Christ, modeled after some Carmelite saints like Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Teresa of Lisieux, Saint John of the Cross, Saint Teresa Benedicta, also known as Edith Stein, Saint Elizabeth Trinity.
How many years have you been?
So it's a beautiful thing. I'm still in practice. It's a 6-year formation process.
Okay.
And it's beautiful because it constantly reminds me of classical education in that, you just don't sign up and join something and say, yeah, I'll be that. and then you read a book and you're that.
Yeah. The script doesn't get you there.
Right. The script doesn't get you there. And often as teachers and parents, it takes time. It takes thought and prayer and to actually start to see the shape of the fruit that you're trying to come to fruition. And even at the end of that 6-year process where I make a promise to say I will live a Christ-centered life of prayer and contemplation, that my studies do not end there and that I still need to meet in community. So even though we are that we are working people who have lives and families, we still have to meet in community once a month around others who are trying to live the same faith experience. And we get together and pray and socialize and read and discuss the way that we are seeking to live out our faith. Thank you for asking that.
Oh, I did interrupt as you were going to apply.
All right. I usually skip over because it seems so what? You're in a religious.
No, that's good because you're going to give us some of the practices.
Yeah, so in Carmelite spirituality, so contemplation ultimately is a gift of God in Carmelite spirituality, that God, that you actually can experience union with God through prayer and have a real experience. But Carmelite contemplative prayer is expressed as turning our gaze again and again to God, present within our very heart, knowing that He is always near, loving, and guiding us. So it's learning how to practice the presence of God throughout your whole day and just turning back to Him, your gaze, your love, your affection, knowing to whom you're speaking. So that's a contemplative way of following a golden thread. Is to be rooted in prayer without ceasing and constantly turning your gaze back to God. So O'Leary, in another book that inspired me, O'Leary in Begin with the Heart tells us the heart that lives in the school of the Spirit learns to discover a sacramental imagination. It can express itself in many ways, in reason and poetry, in silence and in life, ordinary and heroic. The sacramental imagination is the eye, which sees all things in Christ and traces the lines of His work, even in the darkest moments and the desert places. It has courage and it has truth. It is not some sort of enchantment which the Christian events as some sort of protective mantra against a hostile emptiness. It is truly the vision of faith, because it sees God's faithfulness at work and knows how to wait upon Him. A sacramental vision of the golden thread gives us a new way of seeing and understanding, a new way of being, and maybe even opening up this way for others through faith. So the traceable works of Christ become apparent all around us, in others, in nature, and in the great community, and thus enchanting it all. So it's not a made-up enchantment. It is the reality that we are in an enchanted world because of God's grace. So the sacramental vision can give you the eyes to see the wonder.
That's really there.
That's really there.
Yeah.
So a contemplative practice that I learned from a recent weekend retreat I attended, entitled Heart is Where the Home Is, instead of Home is Where the Heart Is. Heart is where the home is. That I think teachers like my sister and the lady from the conference can begin in their teaching practice to consider. And so at this retreat I went on this weekend, it was a silent retreat, a guided silent retreat. So we have a guide who presents sort of workshops, maybe 4 times. We have 4 sessions of workshops, and then we have a lot of time for prayer and contemplation of just prayerfully seeking God or doing whatever you want to do. It's really not a program, but we do worship together. We do have a reconciliation service together, and the weekend is meant for you to listen to God in the silence. And so the workshops that you go to can help you. You can use the workshop as a guide to pray with God, to hear what He is speaking to you, or you're free to just do your own thing as a place of rest. So teachers, I think this workshop, when I was hearing it, I told as a priest who led it, I told him that I would use his talk. I would talk about it at this podcast. And he's like, please do. He's actually a professor at the seminary. So he had 3 areas of the heart that he talked about. The purpose and capacity of our hearts, the structure and receptivity of our heart, and the movement and sending forth of the heart. I'm not going to talk into detail. It was a whole weekend of things, but I do want to give the highlights that I was like, this is so great that this is something teachers and parents can actually practice for themselves. Because like Caldecott said, we are giving. It's a gift of part of the giver is in the gift.
Yep.
So we are extending ourselves in ways. That's why we're tired. That's why you're frustrated.
You're giving yourself.
Because you're giving of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about the purpose and capacity of our hearts. Envision your heart as a home for others. Imagine what your heart looks like as a home. And this was a beautiful thing. He was like, meditate on the icon of the Annunciation, or just the scripture, Luke 1, verse 26 to 38, on the angel Gabriel coming to Mary to announce that she will be the mother of the Lord. Meditate on that, on the receptivity of the heart. And he went into detail about the heart being the symbol of the entire person, the center of human life, of our will, of our temperament, of our being. And that our hearts have the capacity to receive others' hearts. And that God wants to love through us. And that the home as a heart is the place where we can be seen, known, and loved. Where we receive nurturing and belonging. It's a place of rest. It's a place where we intercede for others. It's where we experience the presence of God. And then thinking about the structure and receptivity of the heart. So the heart pumps blood. It's our life. It's our life. It's the engine of our bodies. If our heart stopped pumping, we would cease living. But our heart receives blood, and it holds the blood, and it pumps it out, right? So we need to, in thinking about the structure and receptivity of the heart, there's some habits that were mentioned that we can develop to help to receive. So develop the habits of seeing, listening, being, and feeling. And I was like, this is so appropriate. Teachers of Christian classical education. So in seeing, developing the habit of seeing, that your eyes are connected to your heart. Right? Isn't that amazing? But our eyes are connected to our heart. It's how we receive others into ourselves. It's so rich. If we had more time, it's actually in seeing, we receive others into ourselves. So it's like meditate on the Father's eyes. How does the Father God see us? How can we see as God sees? So with your students, perceive as God perceives. Pay attention and see others. And I can tell you, as a mother of 6 children, sometimes I'm calling children by different names, which drives them crazy. So in my home, I have 3 children left at home, 2 girls and a boy, and I'm looking at the boy and I'm naming all the girls before I get to his name. And he was there. I'm a boy. You still get the girl name.
Can't even get the gender right.
Right. Because I'm not really seeing him. You know, I know I have all these other things going on that I'm distracted from seeing. Even though he's right in front of me and I'm looking in his direction. Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
You're not receiving him.
Exactly. Yeah. The second habit, so first habit of seeing, and then the habit of listening. To attune and to show interest in others. To practice empathetic listening by validating feelings and offering no solutions or unsolicited advice. I think it's probably one of the hardest things to do, especially as parents or teachers of teenagers.
Yeah. Fountains of unsolicited advice.
So the next habit would be the habit of being. Practice being with others by being present in the presence of others. Which will help us to see, which will help us to listen. But practice being with others in the present, by being present in the presence of others. And then the last habit is the habit of feeling, which is empathy. Feel with others, being vulnerable, delight in receiving others. And so I'm thinking about teachers like my sister in the classroom. And I know she would probably say, I don't have time to do any of these. But it's a way of being, and these are habits that you would practice every moment of your life outside the classroom. And you could just focus on one thing at a time, like seeing the students that are in front of you and speaking directly to them. I can almost guarantee, I know in my own home, and I'm sure we all have experienced this, when you give somebody, especially a child, your full attention, even if you came down to their level, I mean, it can stop tantrums in their track. Once the child really knows that you see them, it's like they relax. Or they collapse into your arms. They throw themselves up. They want you to receive them. So I do believe that your day can slow down, even though the clock is still ticking, if you try to practice some of these habits. The third is the movement of the heart, movement and sending forth of the heart. So blood pumps into our heart and blood pumps out of our heart. In that, we have to be willing to hold on loosely and let our children go. And that, I didn't want to just go back a step. In developing these habits, the homework, so he would give us homework at this retreat. So the first homework was to meditate on the Annunciation. The second, when considering the structure and receptivity of the heart of developing habits to receive others, was the visitation. I thought that was so beautiful when Mary visits Elizabeth, and the receiving of that interaction. And then this third step of the movement in the heart and sending forth that happens in the heart is Mary at the foot of the cross.
Wow.
Right. So of being able to let go. And that we cannot hold on to our students, that we can't hold them back, that we have to trust in the process of the way that we're going. So like the way of the cross, like there was a process in there, and we have to trust that there is something out of our abilities to give that the students will have the opportunity to receive. And that there's a distinction between poverty and neediness. A broken heart is a hollowed out space that's created by God to create a poverty, a meaning, an emptiness that love can fill and transform, if that makes any sense. The ability to be able to, that I remember us discussing this broken heart, that's kind of hollowed out space created by God, that it gives us the ability to love, to say, I love you, but I don't need anything from you. That it's unconditional love. And that you understand what you're responsible for, and it helps you to set up boundaries for it. And that I love you, but I don't need anything from you. And so this priest, who had also been a college campus minister, who's now teaching in a seminary, he was saying that most of his young adults, and he was in campus ministry for 11 years, so he's like hundreds of students. He said all of them felt as though that their parents' love was conditional. That they had to have the right grades. They had to have the right way of looking and acting and thoughts and things, that a lot of young people don't feel like they're free to become themselves. And that was really striking. And it's like, it makes you really think, like, do my children know it? Even my students. Because I think in the classroom even, children always want love. Every human being wants to be loved and seen everywhere at all times. But I think if the students know that you love them as they are, and that you don't, so it's not, so I know one of the disciplinary systems can be like these cards where you're on green. If you've been good all day, your card is green. And then the teacher might turn it to yellow. And I don't know if this is in classical schools, but I know we all have some type
Yeah.
of disciplinary
Yeah.
system in the schools.
Yeah.
So the children learn to either to cooperate with the system, but I think ultimately we want the children to be intrinsically motivated to
Right.
be able to choose what is right for the,
Right.
because it's the right thing to do. But then too, there are some children where it's harder for them to comply to the discipline of the classroom, that because their card is always on red, they say forget the cards.
Yeah.
Then the system becomes meaningless to them.
Yeah.
And they're just going to be themselves, do what they want to do, however you want to look at it, because they can't appease you.
Right.
Nothing they do works. And then it's like they're always caught. Like you don't catch them when they're doing good. They're caught when they're doing something bad. And so they learn how to dispose of the system. And so if teachers learned how to love without needing anything from that student, I think that can really affect the discipline and just the atmosphere in the classroom. And so another homework we were given is to meditate on the ascension of Jesus. So when he had to leave his friends, when he had to leave his mother, he had to leave his fledgling church, and how what does that look like for us in our lives when we do our work, when we try to do all the things that we're tasked to do, and then entrusting God in the formation and development of our children. And that these children can now go on and be who they're called to be. But I think that some of these practices teachers can do in their lives outside of the classroom, because you're bringing your whole self into the classroom. So who you are outside the classroom is who you are in the classroom. And so if you learned how to think of your heart as a place of refuge, as a place of the tent of meeting, that's when, as your heart as a sanctuary, not just for yourself but for others. I think it can greatly impact your ability to be able to teach at rest. And so I think the golden thread, moving with those questions, is also about cultivating a contemplative view, practice, and attitude goes along with that. So we have to have a sacramental way of seeing ourselves and our students and our practice of teaching.
Thank you. I think it was John Henry Newman maybe who said that the curriculum is the hearts of the teachers. And there was some motto, I think, in a college that he founded that was heart to heart, or in Latin, but from the heart of the teacher to the heart of the student. That's beautiful. The retreat theme that you've contemplated offering with some wonderful speakers you've been talking to, does that connect to this? What would be the organizing principle or the golden thread for the retreat? Yes.
So I think before, after the course, that the golden thread weaves together people, places, and time. The great community, all of human recorded experience. I was thinking that a lot of times in our doing a classical curriculum, following one, is that sometimes we neglect where we are, so our place. We also neglect our time, because we're looking. Part of the tradition is knowing about those who came before us. and the handing on. But then how are we, who are we in this place, in this time with that knowledge? What's that look like for us? So we often say we're cultivating virtue, we're cultivating wisdom in our students, but what does it look like? Or not just what does it look like, really from a sacramental view or vision of things. How does it look? It's a new way of seeing. It's a new way of understanding. It's a new way of being. So with the retreat, I would love to use New Orleans as the first, because I think this can be done anywhere. So New Orleans is not uniquely special in this. It's just that New Orleans is my place and I know it very well. But that I would love to invite people to come to New Orleans, where we have a speaker who would lead us through, one day would be beauty. We would contemplate beauty together, and then we will go out into the city, have a tour, eat together, and then come together after lunch, let's say, and talk about what we saw. Not just like as tourists, but as people who are seeking to see things anew. So the reality of our places are that we encounter unlovely things all the time and things that are not always beautiful are true. So as we're touring, say, a very specific guided tour of an aspect of the French Quarter, we may encounter people that's drug addicted. We may encounter, this someone recently told me, like, I went to the French Quarter. I didn't see anything beautiful about it. I smelled marijuana in the air. And there were, people on the street. And I'm thinking, like, this is a very educated person. This person, I thought, I know it's very wise and is a Christian. I'm like, and you didn't see anything good or beautiful? Like, how is this possible? I really think that, like, how is this possible? And if we are always talking about these things and we don't see them around us, how can they be real? How can we live this out? Or are we living it out? Or are these just propositions in our minds that we are ideas we play with? So I would like us to get together, talk about the ideas, because the ideas are real good and true. And then I want us to practice being able to see those things around us. And then I also want the retreatants to walk away with something to practice. So like really something they can bring into their teacher practice with references and resources to look up, but also some contemplative things that they can practice to help cultivate this new way of seeing.
Wonderful. So I heard you there referring to both a way of being in the world and then also a way of seeing the world. And it sounds like there's a relationship between those two things.
Yes.
And it is related to the, to the fact of, blood coming into the heart and leaving the heart, the kind of two-directional reality of having a heart that is a place for other persons, that receives other persons, but also the capacity to give yourself and to give yourself into the hearts of others. And it was a little challenging, as you were describing, a very well-educated, Christian person who could not see anything beautiful, moving through a neighborhood in a historic American city. That relationship between seeing the beautiful and being the beautiful, am I correct that those two things go together? How have you experienced that back and forth? Do you practice both and they're kind of mutually beneficial? Being present as a witness of Christ, a beautiful presence in the world, and then receiving Christ,
Right. And then it's from that question of what good could come from Nazareth.
Mhm.
So that's weird. That's one of the questions I mentioned in the Golden Thread course. And it comes from scripture, and that's why I say, though, the Lord is from Nazareth.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an accusation.
Right, it's an accusation. It's like,
Yeah.
and the idea that there could be a place where there is nothing good.
Mm.
Like it's also ludicrous at the same time.
Mhm.
Like there is nothing good. And you're talking about the Lord. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
and so it made me think, actually, to be honest, I was in an urban leader classical situation. And the way they were talking about developing schools in urban areas, classical schools in urban areas, it made me think, what good could come from Nazareth?
Mhm.
Like people
That's
are.
when you had the idea.
That's when I had the idea.
And then you applied it to your own homeschool.
Right, to how I see the world. Because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not just them thinking that
Yeah.
way. I can see myself, you know.
Yeah.
You always should be able to see yourself in others. So let me think, how do I see? Because we're talking about people as if they're a different kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have a different nature.
Mm-hmm.
So if in classical education we're talking about the nature of things, and all nature being one, that means the people don't have different nature. See how that should help us to extend this?
Yeah.
A well-educated person should be able to apply these things in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, wow, we're talking about students, like these are different kind of children.
Yeah.
And how can we educate them?
Mm-hmm.
So if we can educate these over here in this way, I would think we should be able to apply it similarly. So anyway, it made me think what good could come from Nazareth. And the fact that we do not think there's any good. I think in the course I talked about my family reading Dickens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which one? I can't remember the book. Not A Tale of Two Cities. With Pip. Great Expectations.
We said it together.
Right.
Yep.
And reading Great Expectations and the disdain.
Yeah.
My gracious. We were so struck.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we really would have been struck by the disdain if we had not been contemplating what good. The fact that it's an accusation.
Yeah.
And that we're declaring there is no good.
Yeah.
So contemplating that question, it helps us to see disdain. Which is funny because I pray the Psalms and like we are supposed to have disdain towards that which is not of God. And so I guess some people say, well, that's not of God. So I can just, is the person not of God? Or is which also is a tool you learn in classical education to learn with logic. And the 5 common topics and thing, we learn how to think more clearly about things. So it's like we're
separating the person from the disdainful behaviors or ideas that they're trapped by. Yeah. So
it helps us to become people who can hold things together. So the integrity is within us, right? And outside of us. And in the order of the cosmos. It's all being held together. It's one. And I think, so seeing and being and understanding, that all goes together, which I see is lined perfectly with the trivium, right? It's grammar is to know.
Yeah.
And so how do we know? And it's like knowing is not enough. And that we have to understand, we have to be able to express, to communicate, which is an act of being. I think it takes the practical ideas of behind classical education and it helps them to be transformative or transcendent or sacramental.
They're made concrete.
Yes, they're made concrete.
Yeah, in a particular place, a particular time.
Right. And it holds us accountable.
Yeah.
It should.
Yeah.
It should hold us accountable.
What are a couple of the best books you've been reading lately?
Right now in our homeschool, we're reading Henry V. So this year our question is, who do you say I am?
Okay.
which I'm interpreting in this moment. And every year it's like a different emphasis. So it's not like these questions only have one way of looking at them. It's not true. For me this year, who do you say I am is an identity question. I feel like the society is struggling with identity. My children are not immune to the issues outside of my home. And I would like to help. And I have 3 children in college and 3 in high school. So I'm more geared to really preparing their hearts and mind to be out of my home. So if I know the whole world is grappling with identity, I would like to shore up my children with an understanding and framework of identity, so that I can let them go and not try to, be the Holy Spirit in their lives or whatever. That was part of the thing of loving them without condition. But more than that is that, who is God? I want you to have a firm understanding of the nature of God. And I also want you to know who you are in relation to God and therefore others in creation and society. And so Henry V, he wants to be the King of France. Is he the king of? Is he the legitimate King of France? So that's been fun, and I'm using. I was surprised at how fun because this is my first time reading it, and it's actually a fun read. And we're using The Brightest Invention of Heaven. I forget the author's name as a guide, and he does a really good job of is Henry the ideal Christian king, and the idea of mirrors and the reverse reflection. That's been really good to discuss outside of Henry V and helping us to direct our who do you say I am. So Henry V has been really good read. I'm also reading, because of the Golden Thread, I'm reading more about the sacramental vision, or I'm reading a great book called, I mentioned it just a few moments ago, Begin with the Heart. I've also been, for the last 3 years, the director of religious education for my church.
You're a busy lady. Wow.
Right.
Because you work full time too. Yeah.
Well, I have my own business, so my time is a little bit flexible. It's a little bit. Yeah, I don't. It's crazy, but it's I'm well supported. Let's just say that. But
do you have the author of the book you just mentioned?
Oh, Begin with the Heart, Danielle O'Leary.
Danielle O'Leary, Begin with the Heart. Okay.
Begin with the Heart, and that's an interesting book. I'm going to look through it, but it was written in response to the Catechesis of England. So the author is, I don't know if he's English, but it's written for the church in the United Kingdom.
Okay. Wow.
Right. I'm like, we never think about the issues of other. We belong to, a universal church, but we never think about what's going on in other places. And it's a beautiful, so they're talking about essentially how do we shore up, revitalize, or make sure we're continuing the tradition of what I would call a classical liberal education, through the church. And he says we have to. It has to be rooted in love. It really reflects a lot of Caldecott, who was also English. So I thought that was interesting. I never thought about what's going on in the church in England.
Yeah.
So those 2 books are my latest reads. And I'm trying to think if I've been reading anything for fun. I've been trying to, it's hard to read for fun because I don't want to stop. So I'll read through the night and then I can't function in the morning.
Can't get away with that anymore.
Right, I can't do that anymore. So
yeah.
I would like to read Frankenstein. I have a friend who recently read Frankenstein, and the way she talks about it, I'm like, okay, I will.
Oh, yeah.
We really need to read Frankenstein. She's like, it will go so well with the questions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good advice. That sounds great. Well, maybe if you force yourself to read it with your kids, you won't be tempted to, stay up all night
Right, that's
finishing
what,
it.
yes. I do a lot of things that way. I make it part of our educational efforts.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you very much for your time and catching up. And we look forward to some news about the retreat. And it sounds like the timeframes and stuff aren't known yet, but you'll keep us posted as you get some new.
And I would say if people express interest, especially in telling us their best time of the year they would like to see the retreat, because the retreat has to be small.
So you're looking for some feedback.
Yeah,
people
definitely
to contact you and share their ideas and what jumps out at them and times a year.
Right. So we're looking for 25 people.
Okay.
To come to New Orleans to contemplate beauty and memory as we follow the golden thread with a sacramental vision.
Very good. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Classical U podcast. Please do check out our website, classicalu.com, and our teacher magazine, Altum. We hope you've enjoyed these conversations with presenters and live learning event hosts with Classical U.